On this week's episode of Poll Hub, the Granite State has spoken. What does Bernie Sanders' squeaker of a victory mean for the remaining Democratic field as they head into Nevada and South Carolina? We've got that. And we're back! Fresh from our journey to New Hampshire, two of our student democracy tourists join the team to discuss their impressions of the first-in-the-nation primary. This is Poll Hub. Let's get to it. And hi, everyone. I'm Mary Griffith, Media Director for the Marist Poll, sitting in for Jay DeDapper this week.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion. And New Hampshire is done its history again.
New Hampshire Democratic primary 2020.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
We will be revisiting it as electoral votes in the fall.
Yeah, and it's not history in the sense of it being forever demolished. It's, in fact,
they survived us.
It's only 4 years to the next New Hampshire primary. Anyway, so it was really a squeaker, very close. And in fact, as close, the only ones closer perhaps were Republican New Hampshire primaries in 1976 and 1996. So this is certainly one for the records for the Democratic side, and I think we learned an awful lot from the electorate. Barb, maybe you can talk a little bit about the pre-election polls, and then we'll talk about the exit polls themselves. I know my big takeaway is debates matter, but anyway, what's yours?
Yeah, well, Bernie Sanders squeaked through with fewer than 4,000 votes over Pete Buttigieg, as we learned when we visited one of his rallies on how to pronounce his name properly. But certainly a far cry from the 60% of the vote that he had gotten in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Certainly a much larger field, but still they can't be too happy with how they underperformed this time. But the polls did really well.
And that's all we really care about, right?
Most of the polls had 1, 2, 3, at least the ones that were done in the last few days. And the reason for that is that you really needed to be in the field late on this particular primary because so many voters, according to the exit polls, made up their minds in the last week. In fact, both Buttigieg and Klobuchar's supporters, most of them said that they had made up their minds just in the last few days. So, as you said, Lee, debates definitely matter. The exit poll showed a lot of interesting things, particularly about the support of each of the candidates. And what we're going to see is, as we're moving forward, as the states change demographically, we can tell a little bit from the results in New Hampshire how the candidates may do in the future by looking at their base of support. So, for instance, obviously, New Hampshire is a very, very white state.
Iowa.
As was Iowa. So the support among people of color in the Democratic Party is still something to be determined. We'll get a little bit of that in Nevada and a lot more of that in South Carolina. But looking at some of the demographics, Bernie Sanders really did best among people, under 45 and particularly those under 30, which for the oldest candidate in the pack seems a little counterintuitive, but he's really talking about a movement, a revolution, stirring things up, structural change, and that appeals to people who are younger.
Yeah, I was just going to say, though, but one of the concerns coming out of both Iowa and New Hampshire in the Sanders camp, and for those looking at it, is although he gets the lion's share of the young vote, that revolution talk about bringing this massive influx of new voters and young folks into the process really didn't materialize. In fact, the exit polls show that in New Hampshire, for example, in 2008, 18% was under 30, 19% last time. This time, only 14% of the vote were people under 30. In contrast, people over 65 went from 13 to 18 to 25 this time. So what you have is a shifting of the age seesaw a little bit in favor of older folks away from younger folks. And that probably explains an awful lot why this was as close as it was. Had he gotten the kind of turnout that he was hoping for, he would have won by a far wider margin. So that's something the Sanders camp has to worry about, and the Democratic Party has to worry about also. He's not attracting the kind of like new folks with that kind of enthusiasm that they were hoping to do.
Mary, does that surprise you? Because I don't want this to be a spoiler alert, but we are going to talk a little bit about the touring we did in New Hampshire during the pre-primary weekend with our students. But you did go to a Get Out the Vote rally with our students the night before, primary eve in New Hampshire for the Sanders campaign, where they, had a concert. Were you surprised that they didn't get the turnout the next day?
I was, based on the scene on the ground at that Get Out the Vote rally. It was quite energetic. It was highly populated by those under 30. Again, it was on a college campus, and it was a Get Out the Vote concert, so that might have shifted things or swayed things a little bit, but the energy and the enthusiasm among younger voters was certainly there. But as we look ahead to Nevada, I was curious to get your views on the role of endorsements as we move from the New Hampshire primary to the Nevada caucus. There's a very powerful union in Nevada, the Culinary Union, and they came out in the past couple of days and basically said that they're not choosing to endorse any particular candidate, but they are kind of steering their union members away from one. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and look, the union is a huge group in the Nevada caucus, and as a caucus...
Well, yeah, I was about to say, please, it is a caucus, so that changes everything.
Yeah, that means the intensity and the energy really matters double-fold, like it did in Iowa. But so you have this union, and basically, although they're not endorsing one candidate, they're certainly not in love with the Sanders health care plan. And this is, controversial. Why? Because if you do Medicare for all, the concern among the unions is that their hard-earned negotiated health care plans may go back up in the air for negotiation again. And this is causing a lot of consternation on the part of folks out there. There's, Sanders has a lot of endorsements in Nevada, but the most powerful group is on the sideline, not because they're torn between him and the other candidates, but among the other candidates themselves, they're not sure who to go for.
And certainly Buttigieg and Klobuchar did well and probably helped their margins among the rest of the pack, among those voters who oppose changing health care to a single government health plan. They're more likely to lean towards Buttigieg and both Klobuchar's position that, yes, you can expand Medicare, but you shouldn't be throwing away the private insurance system when you go about doing that.
I did note that, and I know AOC was at the Bernie Get Out the Vote rally that you were at, Mary.
Including, and so was Nina Turner and...
But one of the
Cornel West.
One of the things that AOC has been talking about is, maybe Medicare for all, we may not get all of that. Maybe we'll end up with a public option. And that would be a big compromise, but one we might be willing to take. So there's a sense here that maybe the Sanders team has to broaden their coalition beyond their base of support among young people, because that may not do it for the big Super Tuesday coming up around the bend.
Because not surprisingly, we also see that, quite a large proportion of voters see electability, beating Trump, as the main goal of their Democratic nominee. And when we look at what New Hampshire said in this case, although I don't think it's all that different from Democrats around the country, electability is very important, and Buttigieg led among those voters who felt that was their top priority over having a candidate who matched up better with them on the issues.
And, I know we just have a few seconds left before we move on to our second segment with and bringing our students in. But I did just want to talk for a second, not just about those who position themselves well in New Hampshire, but those who perhaps need to prove themselves moving forward. Barb, you mentioned electability, and that has really been Joe Biden's stronghold in terms of his positioning himself in these states, but he really finds himself, along with Elizabeth Warren, in a precarious position moving into Nevada. So what do you think about all of this?
Yeah, I think certainly Vice President Biden had a really, really tough time in New Hampshire. Mary, I know you and I and Lee's wife Nancy went to grab a quick burger in Nashua on
Primary Day.
Was it primary
Yeah,
day?
sure.
Primary day.
Primary day.
Yes.
Before it was primary day, and we bumped into the vice president coming out of the same, burger place, and they were incredibly demoralized.
To the point that he left the state at that point to go to South Carolina,
Yeah.
and therefore
It definitely
pulled the
had
plug
to be
on his support.
disappointing. As Lee mentioned, debates matter. I think perhaps his energy and his answers in the debate on Friday, were just not satisfying to voters. We and our students were in the room that evening and didn't feel that the vice president had matched his other performances. But Lee actually was talking a great deal about another candidate that's about to come into the contest.
Well, it's the one everybody's been seeing on TV.
Another B candidate, just what we need. But he had an idea about what Bloomberg might have done.
Well, we talked about this on earlier podcasts, and I'll just close out the chapter on New Hampshire with the notion that Michael Bloomberg, could have perhaps run well, I should say, as a write-in candidate, something New Hampshire voters are not averse to doing.
They really know how to do.
He got 1.7% of the Democratic primary vote as a write-in candidate, doing nothing other than the ads we've been seeing on TV. But he didn't even say, folks, if you want me as your president, I'm not on the ballot, but you can write my name in.
So you think he should have made the ask?
I don't think when you run as a write-in, you never step foot in the state. There's no downside to that. And for him, sure, he's looking very strong on the sidelines, and maybe the show is going to go on the road and leave him behind. But he's gotten the result so far that exactly what he wanted. Different winners, different folks doing it. Biden not there. And so the rationale for the Bloomberg candidacy and the $300 million he's already spent on TV ads is still intact. And that's a person we're going to see a lot of in the future.
Well, not a lot of these candidates can also compete in Super Tuesday the way they can. How many states is it?
It's 14 states. And when we get to Super Tuesday, we'll have only had
So just to go through the calendar, it's going to be Nevada. This is it a week from Saturday.
Yeah.
Then it's South Carolina, and then we head to
3 days later. And at that point, you will have had only 4% of the delegates selected. And on Super Tuesday, there'll be another 34% selected. And so that's just enormous in terms of what this whole primary contest is all about.
Well, Bloomberg wasn't on the ground in New Hampshire, but we definitely were. Most of the
that was a great segue, Barb, I must say.
Well, you just served it up, Lee.
Okay.
So it was really easy for me. So most of the Marist pollsters were up in the Granite State, as we do quadrennially, to observe and play democracy tours. And along with us this time were 27 Marist College students who also took the chance to get on the bus and head to New Hampshire. Two of them are with us today. Alexandria Watts, Marist College, class of 2020. Oh gosh, graduating. It's awful. We're going to miss her terribly. And Marist Poll, and she's also the Marist Poll newsfeed media assistant. And then Mark Palmer, also Marist class of 2020. Can we figure out a way to keep you guys
Well, I
here?
can flunk them in class.
I would love
Do you
to.
have them in class?
I
I
can-
mean,
I
can we
can
flunk
flunk
them?
Mark in class.
No, but just
just-
joking. Welcome,
You
welcome.
think? Just joking.
No, you're not.
Just joking about the failing grade, not joking about certainly missing you when you graduate. It's always tough for us, especially when we have such stars. But you guys were on the bus. Allie, you were on bus Barbara when you were with Team Barbara, and Mark, you were actually you were with Team Lee.
Wah, wah, wah.
You got the short straw. But
Thanks. Lee was a short straw.
oh, no.
Another height joke.
But welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And so tell us, why don't we, Allie, you start us off and just tell us a little bit about, your thoughts and reactions to the what is it, 4 or 5 days that we were in New Hampshire.
Well, I had an absolutely amazing time. That entire time we were there, I just felt like a kid in Candyland. Like there was just so much to do, so much to see. We saw a wide range of candidates. Some of us went to a Trump rally, and then other events that we went to were Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren. We saw everyone live at a debate. And we didn't know if we were exactly going to go to the debate that night. So being on the bus and being like, we could probably go to a debate. That was so much fun.
Yeah,
we
the
Yep.
St. Anselm's Institute of Politics, where we were going to have a watch party, at the last minute said, "Hey, if you make it in time to pick up the shuttle, you can get actually into the hockey ring to see
And
the
then Mary
debate."
kept messaging them, we are 19 feet away. We are 16 feet away. We're 14 feet away.
It was definitely a
No
good rush.
stress. No stress.
But yeah, we had that experience. And also, I'm a journalism major here, and I had a lot of experience going behind the scenes. We went to Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, and then Team Lee went to Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, and that was a lot of fun, getting to see the behind the scenes of it all and kind of the glamour that kind of goes into the newscast. So it was very fun, very hands-on, and I wish we could go back and do it again.
Yeah, I know everybody was saying, "Can we please go to Nevada or South Carolina?" But there's nothing like New Hampshire.
No.
New Hampshire's really on the ground retail politics, and it's pretty cool. How about you, Mark? What were some of your impressions? Was it what you expected?
It is, well, let me say this. Being from LA, we don't have the same style of politics. And New Hampshire is definitely a fun place to be during the primary. And the energy on the ground for all candidates were there. And being in the same room as Amy Klobuchar, and being in the same room as Mayor Pete, and being in the same room with Chuck Todd, and seeing the production and behind the scenes was absolutely incredible. That's not something you see every day, and New Hampshire gets the luxury of getting that every 4 years, and that's not how other states kind of handle their primaries. And it's just incredible. I'm kind of lost for words. There's so much to take in.
Yeah. Well, you also were at the Trump rally.
It was also a Trump rally, yeah.
So that was perhaps the first time you'd seen a president in person, or
That was the first time I've seen a sitting president.
Sitting
in person.
president, okay.
Yeah, I've been to Barack Obama's rally, but he was at the time a candidate.
Okay.
And that energy was, at the time at the University of Southern California, was incredible. And I mean, I can't really describe that. And that was in its own category, but a Trump rally is in its own category by itself. Energy there, being on the ground, being on the floor, and meeting senators and meeting a congressman, just walking around casually. That says a lot about them, but it also says something about Trump supporters a little bit, because they didn't really care about Rick Scott, even though he was down there. They didn't care about Congressman Mike Johnson. No one knows who that really is. Even though he represents Louisiana's 4th district, no one really cared about him. And a few of us went to go talk to both of them, and they were just in their own lane, minding their own business, and walking around on the floor. That energy is incredible, and whoever the Democratic nominee happens to be, whether it's Bernie, whoever it is, they will have a big fight on their hands going against Donald Trump in the election.
interesting observations.
And not only were there politicians, obviously on the ground, or the candidates on the ground, but you guys also got to see journalists in action, doing their job, covering the rallies, covering the events. Did anything strike you, Allie? Why don't we start with you in terms of how they do their job, and perhaps how this may counter some of your perceptions of the role of a political journalist?
Well, we did get to see, at least for the Chris Wallace side, we saw it go live to tape. So we kind of got to see them pre-record some interviews with Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, and kind of just how he interacted with those candidates. So like when Bernie Sanders at the time phoned in, and how he interacted with him, he wanted to say goodbye to the senator, and just like that behind the scenes aspect was also really cool. And I thought it was kind of cool that he brought us down. Like he said, hey, like let's bring these students down here. I want them to see what I'm doing, and kind of seeing that live and getting that energy. And has like, I got to see him a little bit like in terms of how he was working and like just all of that experience. It was fun to watch kind of the behind the scenes and like the producers moving around, and you had like the four split on one side and how that worked. So yeah, it was just a lot of like the behind the scenes things that were really cool to me. And I thought getting to see him in action and interviewing again like candidates and also just the panel that was there, it was just a really good energy and a lot of fun for me to watch as a prospective journalist.
You've interned at Fox in New York.
I have, yes.
Yeah, so this was sort of like you were now a secret spectator.
Oh yeah, this was completely different though. I was a social media and an audience development intern, so I worked more with the digital news team on their newsroom side, and this was just going into production and seeing like, you know, the lights, the cameras, the action, and kind of like the glamour of TV. That was very interesting for me to see, and it was a lot of fun.
And then the long wait.
Oh yes.
Yeah, Mark,
Definitely.
you contrasted New Hampshire with your home state of California. Not only is it in terms of the intimacy on the ground, but you know the media side of the world. I mean, you can't do this in California.
No.
Yeah. So, what was your perceptions of how the journalists were doing their job?
I think they did their job well. I mean, walking around, whether it was Amy Klobuchar's event, or whether it was a DNC event, or whether it was the Trump rally, media did their job, and it was clear that they were there for one mission, and you could tell in their face. And the first question that they asked you, whether it was in line or anything, are you from New Hampshire? If you're not from New Hampshire, they said, okay, thank you. I have to go.
Although you did get interviewed.
I did. Did get interviewed by a student from
NYU?
NYU. I think NYU works, and then he works for the LA Times.
Oh, okay.
And then got interviewed by Fox and Friends, but did not make the final cut. I guess I didn't fit the
You
narrative.
learned a hard lesson about TV production
Yeah,
right there.
I did. I didn't fit the narrative, and that's okay. So, yeah, the journalists definitely did their job, and I was impressed by that because I'd never seen anything like that before. Just because in LA,
Sure, you don't get to observe that.
You don't get to observe that. That's not what LA. That's not what California primaries are all about.
That's why they put Hollywood in California, not in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Right.
Was there one particular event that stood out to you?
I think they all were highlights in their own way, but the one that really stuck out, I think, was Donald Trump's rally, only because we had the choice of going to Bernie Sanders' rally, and I'd never been to Bernie Sanders' rally before, but I know for a fact, being from California, I could always go to one because he always has a few in LA, in the area, and Donald Trump has not had a rally in LA and never will have a rally in LA. So I said, well, let me see it for myself, and maybe I could debunk some myths about a Donald Trump rally, maybe, right? Yeah. And being there, that was a spectacle. Everything is organized. I give the campaign credit. Everything is organized to a T. They make sure that everyone's at their seat. Concessions stop at 6:30, and everything is closed, so there's no reason for you to be out of your seat. So which means you're pretty much locked in on whoever's speaking, whether it's Don Jr. or whether it was Mike Pence. You're pretty much locked in your seat. And there's no getting around that. And security's everywhere. I didn't feel uncomfortable being there, or comfortable. I was kind of really observing everything and really trying to soak everything in and analyze. It was more so a lot of analyzing in my head more than anything.
And that's what I think a great experience, because what you're doing is you're experiencing the moment, but then you're also trying to assess what it all means.
Right.
And that's exactly, from a teaching standpoint, that's what the purpose of all this is.
Right. Yeah, and I have been to rallies of other sitting presidents, so the security was pretty standard, along with the the lockdown at the end when they make sure that the president does leave the arena before anyone else does. But it was very interesting. You said you're kind of mulling over some conclusions. Did you come to any?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that kind of caught my eye, and been talking to people about it. And I was sitting next to a family, and they had a small child, and Don Jr. I think it was either Don Jr. Donald Trump was talking. One of them were talking. They both kind of get kind of confused in the head when you hear
It was
them
a
talk.
lot.
It was a lot.
Really, it was a lot. It was
Um,
fast paced, and it was a lot. And
very fast paced. And they were talking about immigration policy and going on and on about immigration policy, about build the wall, do this, that, and the other. And before they were done speaking, a small child, maybe two years old, she was clapping before they're even done speaking. And that kind of got me a little bit internally. I had to email one of my mentors on campus and tell him, like, well, what's going on here, and only because
why did it move? Yeah, why did it move you?
The rhetoric that you hear at the rally. I mean, it's typical Trump campaign stuff that you see on TV. But being there live and seeing a small child kind of react to that, I don't know what that means for the generation that's being raised under people who support Donald Trump. And it's not to say that they can't change or grow, but right now at the current moment, I kind of stepped back and was like, "Ooh, that's a little much."
She knew the applause lines.
Yeah, she knew everything.
But I think also we were at so many events, and obviously most of the people who go to these events are diehard supporters of, although a lot of people are still shopping in New Hampshire, but there's a lot of committed people, and so you're around a lot of applause makers, and you do get caught up in some of that.
Well, I think it's also difficult to, when you're on the ground, to get a sense of whether this is a movement or whether this is just a small group of people who are very excited about this candidate. Because as you did say, Lee, everybody there is, or most people there, are there to really support the candidate. And particularly at the Trump rally, it was a very typical rally, but
For him.
Well, no. I think it was a typical political rally.
Okay.
I didn't have a sense that this was, kind of the protesting,
Okay. Yeah, sure.
fighting, kinds of things that we have seen, in the media. That didn't happen at this rally, and I thought the rally itself was very typical. What was not typical was the rhetoric, which I think we all were took pause because of the fact that he also brought back the reading of the snake analogy, and he had very harsh words on the topic of immigration. And for those of us who do not support some of those policies and see them as particularly harsh, it was really intense rhetoric. But Allie, I did want to just ask you, I know Lee's giving me the sign, and Mary's about to jump in to cut me off, but what was the most important moment for you?
I think mine was very similar to Mark's. I just liked analyzing the different demographics of the crowds that were at the rallies that we went to. So again, like the Trump demographic, it was very more like middle-aged, older generations, and maybe like a young male population, and kind of seeing that, and like just again like the atmosphere as we were kind of talking about. There was, before we got in, like there was a huge line, and there was old country rock playing, and kind of like it sounded like a party, and like Mark touched on it a lot. They really focused you in on Trump and in on that moment and created that energy. Whereas like a Warren rally, they played like kind of what we described as oldies music, and there was a much older demographic there for the most part. And her campaign, even like looking at her signage and her colors, they were softer, and she had more about more surrogates and more policy rather than Trump trying to rally up everyone. And I thought Buttigieg's was the most interesting in terms of those observations, because his demographics seemed to have a wide variety of ages. I had children in front of me, they couldn't be any older than 10, and they were listening so intently. And there was also like much older generations. Like he kind of ran the gambit in terms of his demographics. So he did
on the exit poll when it showed that he got a kind of like a lot from sort of like all the different groups.
Right. And it's so interesting to see like that match up in a small setting like that to now you see it in the primary and like in bigger numbers. So I guess kind of taking that observation and connecting it to a communication standpoint, that was very cool.
I would say that this is not my forte by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought President Trump's playlist was probably the best.
Yes,
I
no,
mean,
Oh,
we,
yes.
we did take a vote, and Buttigieg and the president definitely had the best playlist.
I would close with just two, teacher observations. One is the students came away, I thought, with an interesting observation on the bus as we were riding around, in that they were hearing a lot of the stump speeches. So the first time they heard Amy Klobuchar do a very funny line at the debate, that was a funny line. The next night, they saw it at the Democratic Forum. Oh, you mean that wasn't an ad lib yesterday? I thought it was. And then at her rally, there was the line again. It had to do with the Denmark. And who would say such a thing? It's some people have heard. And so now it's 3 times I've heard the same joke line. And that tells you something about the candidates. The other thing I would say, and I'll just close with this, I thought it was really interesting when you guys saw Buttigieg at Fox News in the morning, and then he came over to meet the press. And so I kind of got my money's worth and said, "Hi, we're from Marist." And he said
he'd already met people
and he
from
said,
Marist.
I said, I would just, you guys are all over the place. I just saw the group from Marist and Fox.
He was great. He was very engaging at Fox and spoke with the students. And we did have one student in the group who has been a Buttigieg fan since the start. And he did get to chat with him and get his picture for the
There you
family
go.
albums down the road.
There you go. And then there was also the student who said to Bernie Sanders, "I have a cat named Bernie Sandbox."
Yes,
and that got
and she
Sanders
got-
to react. I have no doubt about it.
Well, not only that, she
forget about the
her
ballpark.
Twitter feed lit up as well. But
Okay.
thank you guys.
Thanks
we
for
really,
making the
really
trip.
appreciate
It's
you
great.
coming up on the trip. And
It doesn't happen
was
without you
it was
guys.
a blast for us, and I hope you enjoyed. We certainly learned both from the experience and from your observations and reactions on the trip as well.
Well, thank you guys for having us. We had an absolute blast, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thank you.
so much. Really appreciate it.
Very good. So, and I guess that will do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mary Griffith is our executive producer, and she was also with us for a little bit of this today as well. And Casey Schaff is our editor.
And today, Mike Conti was sitting in for Mary at the machine there, at the tools. I want to thank the Roper Center Archives at Cornell, also the exit poll folks at Edison Research, who provided us with a lot of those exit poll insights that we pass on along to you.
And if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us on social media. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. And actually, you'll see lots of
Pictures.
Allie's tweets and photos, because as a newsfeed assistant, she helped organize the photos on social during the trip. And you'll get to see them and as we progress. And certainly, if you want to learn more about polling and the things we talk about each week, we like to plug our online learning platform, the Marist Poll Academy. It's visual, engaging, and of course, as we have said, it is free. Finally, if you like what you hear on Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review on your podcasting app of choice. Positive reviews help others find us. And in fact, I think we actually got a couple of more listeners in New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire, yes.
Yep. And while you're at it, please go ahead and subscribe. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.